Today we're talking all about finding second shooters, the benefits of having a second shooter at your wedding, the struggles that often come along with finding someone that is trustworthy and reliable. Are they really worth it? This video, me and my friend Aaron from the Wedding Storyteller podcast talk all about second shooters, our process, what we've experienced. So if you like today's episode, it will mean so much if you go check him out on Instagram and Facebook, even on YouTube at theweddingstoryteller.co. And as always, if you like today's video, it means so much if you consider liking and subscribing. So without further ado, let's get into today's video all about second shooters.
Why would somebody ever need a second shooter? Like, what's the point of a second shooter?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I feel like a lot of times couples even ask that question because they don't really think, well, do we need to pay for a second videographer? Do we need that? What's the point? What's the purpose? Honestly, I think having a second shooter at your wedding is amazing for a couple different reasons. Not just because of the storytelling aspect of being able to capture multiple angles so that you can really create an immersive film for your couple, but also it just like allows the filmmaker, the storyteller, to have some peace of mind on the day, knowing that you have some extra hands, that you have just another creative friend there. I think that's just worth its weight in gold, right? Is, because this is a very isolated industry, having someone else there to bounce ideas off of, to just be creative with. I think all of those things are why second shooters are so worth it, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, from just, like I said, the storytelling aspect, the creative friend, and I would say those are just like the top two. I mean, that's like...
Yeah, for sure. I remember when I first started, I was shooting solo. And the amount of stress that I took from just shooting by myself was a lot. And there's still people that on groups that I'm just looking at, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're shooting solo." Where I'm like, listen, cool, but I don't know if I could do that. Like, that's just so much pressure,
Yeah.
Especially when the photographer has two photographers, and it's like one is in one place, one is in the other, and it's like you're like, okay, which one am I going to go to and which one am I not going to go to, like, for the getting ready? Or the first look is happening, I've got to run over there while I'm doing these portraits. Like, it can be so stressful. But if that's your business model, like, cool.
Yeah.
Do that. And if it's working out for you, great. But I believe that for most of us, we're always looking to kind of level up and move into what's next for our business. And that could come in the form of second shooters, and let's talk about hiring second shooters.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the topics that, I hear about all the time. It's like, I just don't know there's nobody available. There's, nobody can help me, or the opposite, where it's like, yeah, I hired this person, but they sucked. And they won't say it that way. And they're like, yeah, but this person gave me 50 shots for the whole wedding. Or this person, everything was just shaky or out of focus. It's like, cool. But I think if you're able to hire the right person and kind of do some research and get to a place where you have a really solid relationship with a second shooter or multiple second shooters, that's going to elevate your business and take you to the next level. Jared, talk to us about what are some things you're looking for on a second shooter. I think this is going to be really important for anyone that's really looking for a solid second shooter.
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question. I mean, because when you go to look for a second shooter, it's, especially like 4 years ago, it was really difficult. It was really hard to find someone that was, that was experienced, that, could, actually, work a camera, that had camera experience. And, that's the hard thing. I think now it's a little bit easier to, find second shooters or find videographers that at least have the experience. It might not be as easy still finding someone that's local or in your area, but yeah, I think you really want your second shooter to be an extension of yourself. I mean, that's the dream, right? You want, basically, if they could be two of you, if you could just clone yourself and like, have a whole team of yous, that's kind of what you want, because obviously everyone's eye is different. Everyone has that, that different creative eye. And so, it can be really challenging and oftentimes defeating when you have second shooters that just don't live up to your expectation. But I think too, it's also coming at that with a bit more compassion and just like being a better communicator too. I'm speaking for myself mostly, because when I first started, I would get so frustrated, and I would have to like look back and think, well, did I really communicate my needs efficiently? Did I really do what I needed to do? Did I really, get my message across to them? And I think as long as you are communicating, as long as you are just, letting them know like your needs, what, the client's expecting, just having some kind of game plan for your second shooter is going to help, even if they are a little bit less experienced. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for is obviously someone that, well, I can hang out with for the whole day, right? Someone I can connect with, someone that like, isn't super awkward. I mean, I'm kind of awkward, so it's fine. But I'm just saying that isn't, too just to themselves, and someone that's going to be a good experience for not just me, but also the couple too. Because, when you have second shooters, they're also a reflection of, your brand, and you want them to be a positive impact for sure.
Well, absolutely. Dude, yeah, this is good. I had a second shooter, I'm not going to mention a name, but came to a wedding, and I was like, dude, like, what are you wearing?
Oh, no.
I'm just like, tennis shoes, like this beige, like, outfit. I'm like, bro, what is happening right now? Like, this is not our brand. I had a conversation afterwards, but it's like, at that point, you can't do much about it, and it was just like, trying to guide this dude into what we want, what we needed, and like constantly being, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that. Like, it was almost stressful. Like, I almost rather not have a second shooter at that point, so. But then I had an experience with another second shooter, and I will mention his name. His name is Adam from Square City Productions, and he came by and second shot for us at a wedding in Hilton Head Island. And it was just phenomenal. One of the, like, if you're really going to compare, it's like night and day. And Adam was just like, hey man, what can I do for you? Hey man, like, what if I go and get, this B-roll from, cocktail hour? It was just like, he represented our brand really, really well. And I think as second shooters, that is one of the best things that we can do, or we can look for on a second shooter, is somebody that's going to represent our brand 100% and go above and beyond, the things that we communicated or that we're asking. But it also comes with a price. Yeah. If you want a really good second shooter, you're going to have to pay good, and that's okay. And I think that's the question. It's like, what do you want? Like, what level of second shooter are you looking for? And that's what you're going to get. Are you going to get like an average second shooter that's just like, all right, cool, I'll do what you tell me, but that's it? Or are you going to pay up and have somebody that's going to represent your brand well, that's able to come in and say, hey, I'll do this, or what do you need from me, or how can I do this? Like, and somebody that's communicating with you, that's just going to elevate that film. And then at the end of the day, elevate your brand as a whole.
Yeah, 100%.
Jared, so this is going to be one of those things that I'm kind of scared to ask, but from your perspective, I second shot for you at one point, and I'd love to hear, like, what are some things that maybe stood out to you, or maybe didn't, and like, this is one of those honest conversations that we can have. But like, talk to me about your second shooting experience with me.
Okay, here we go. You guys want me to spill the beans on Aaron over here.
Don't roast me too hard.
Oh man, honestly, the experience I had obviously with you was just such a positive one. It was just so awesome. If I could clone like 50 of you and just have you shoot my entire weddings for the year, that'd be amazing. I mean, even like the couple themselves, like absolutely loved you. And that's like the best case scenario, right? You want even your couples to be like, oh my gosh, you're second. Like what's their Instagram? What's their name? Like I want to send them something. Like that's what you want. You want your couple to be so excited about the experience that you're giving them, not just from yourself, but also with your second. And oh man, you just went above and beyond. I mean, when I arrived there, I just like, one, I was already excited like to work with you, but two, like, you know, there's also that like, you know, unknown feeling, like I didn't know what to expect, you know?
Right.
And like, man, you got me coffee, like you're spoiling me already with like a sweet cream cold brew from Starbucks, dude. Like that was like my favorite. Didn't even tell you my coffee order, but you knew it, you know, you were just like, hey, I'm going to get you sensed it. You just knew that I was a vanilla sweet cream cold brew kind of guy. And yeah, I mean, just going above and beyond, like you said, is something you did. Like I didn't even have to like ask for things, right? Like, I mean, when we were after ceremony, when we were doing like family, you were already at cocktail hour, like setting up lights, setting up audio. You were getting cocktail hour shots. You were flying the drone for the reception. And like, I like just, you know, looked down. I was like, oh, where's Aaron? I wonder what he's doing. And I'm like, and I look over and you're like flying the drone. I'm like, dude, this guy is like already on it. And then you came up to me after you flew the drone, after we were going to portraits. And I was like, hey, real quick, did you happen to set up audio for like, he's like, yep, got it all patched in. We're good to go. Got like dual channel audio going. Like we're in it. And I'm just like, dude, like, just like, don't leave me. Like, please just like stay. Don't leave me.
Don't leave me.
But no, man, like that, and that's the stuff you dream about. That's the stuff you want in a second shooter. Someone who is just like, someone who shows that initiative where you don't have to say anything, especially if you're an introvert like me, where sometimes it is hard to communicate. Sometimes it's hard to get your message across and connect with people. And yeah, it was just like, that was the dream. That was it. I mean, and like I said before, it's like the couple like loved you and they had an amazing experience, and that's more than I could ask for. So job well done, sir.
Yeah. Dude, thanks, man. I love that. No, and honestly, so here's my take on that. I felt you asked me to shoot a specific picture profile for that day. I remember this very, very vividly. I was like, excuse me, sir, I don't shoot with that picture profile. And I was like, you know what? Let's go in there. I've never shot with this picture profile, but I'm gonna do my best, right? And I do remember saying, "Hey, Jared, how does this look? Hey, Jared, what do you think about this?" And you and if I didn't ask that, I would probably shoot that whole wedding and have clips that were totally off. But because I was able to ask you those questions and you were giving me feedback, and you're like, "Hey, I exposed for the highlights to be at like 0 on that meter," then I kind of had to adjust on the way that I would typically expose S-Log to what I would expose, you know, with the picture profile that you asked me to shoot with. But again, it's like, if I didn't ask that, then that would have been a terrible experience for you, because then it would have been like overexposed shots all the way through to the end of the wedding. You know, but again, it's like, how can we represent somebody else's brand, you know? And in this case, like, how could I serve you? By serving the couples, by serving the planner, by serving the people that I interacted with. The photographers were amazing, so that made it even easier. But, you know, all of these little things that you want to think about and think about, how would you represent your own brand, and look for somebody who has these characteristics, you know, in their own brand. And don't be afraid to ask people that are better than you. Like, don't, you know, go out and say, "Hey, how much would you charge for to second shoot with me for, you know, 5 to 8 hours?" Like, and they'll give you a price, and then you'll be like, "Oh my gosh." But if you do that, A, you're going to create more connections. B, you're going to have an incredible film, and somebody that you can trust to say, "Hey, can you go capture the guys?" Like, and lean into the strengths that you have, and lean into the strengths of people. if you know that you have a second shooter who isn't very well at communicating with the bride, but is awesome at communicating with the groom and the groomsman, then send them to the groom and the groomsman, and then you go and set up the bride and do everything with the bride. Like, I have a really strong point with communicating with the bride and bridesmaids. I love it, And Jerry, you took over the guys, and you had me go up to the girls for that day, and being able to just communicate and like use the strengths that we have individually to shoot this whole wedding, and at the end of the day, like, get awesome clips of the things that you know how to get really well. I think that's just really, really important and key to be a second shooter and to look for a second shooter. Is there anything else that you might say about that?
I mean, I think that's all like so true. Yeah, I mean, and I would say this as well as like second shooters is, if you find someone like that you really connect well with, but maybe they're not as experienced as you, right? Consider this tip as training to retain, right? So train to retain that person so that like you are, showing them like how you like approach a wedding, showing them how you film, showing them all like, all the things that you've learned. And that way you have someone on your team that's like an extension of you already built in, that's like so crucial, and something that I've found along the way. I've had maybe 10 second shooters at this point, and, you have to go through a couple bad eggs to find that golden egg. And, once you got him or her, it's like, hey, hang on, don't let go, So, train to retain for sure is a good tip.
Would you say with that, because talking about training, and that takes leadership, right? So leadership in our part. And I heard it once said, I don't remember who said it, but basically, good leaders build leaders to release. And I think the release part is the thing that we're really terrified about when we train and spend time with these second shooters, that we're like, hey, I'm willing to train you. But how do we look past that release? Or like, because we're not owning these second shooters. Like, sometimes we feel like we should and we need to, but we're not at the end of the day. So how do you struggle with that? I mean, or how do you come into terms with yourself and with other people? Like, hey, I'm doing I'm doing my part, but at the same time, like, the retaining, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be tricky, because you'll go through these motions and you'll pour all this energy into someone, and then maybe 6 months down the road they're just either like not into it anymore, or they like want to go do their own thing. And I think honestly you just have to come at it with like a compassionate heart, and just understand that like, hey, everyone's got their own lives, like everyone's got their own things to to do. They have their own purpose. And so it just kind of comes with the territory, unfortunately. It's funny you say that. I mean, I had the groom for the wedding that you helped me shoot. He used to be a second shooter of mine. He shot maybe a handful of weddings.
That's awesome.
But then like, he actually transitioned out of weddings, and he does like commercial stuff. He's like really big in Charlotte right now. Doing a lot of good commercial projects. And so, I just think it comes with the territory. I think it's not to get too like emotionally attached, but just kind of understand that like, hey, just like, this person, you're kind of helping them get to the next step in their career. And that to me is something that like, that's a great feeling too, is like, if I have helped someone achieve their goals, like in the short time that they've been with me, I feel like that's a win, Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. And I think that builds trust, with those people. And if there's ever, like, if you're ever in a need of second shooter, like, they're willing to put themselves out there and be like, hey, like, I have this guy, like, you can trust him, like, and they almost know what to look for if you set them up for success. So I love that. Then what else? There was, what about let's talk about just like pricing and charging for second shooter and all of these things. I think this is one of those topics that is all over the place with pricing, and it all depends on A, like what you think your worth is, B, also like what are you willing to kind of fork out for a second shooter, and looking at your like what are you charging for weddings and stuff like that. All of these little things that go into play on like second shooting or second shooters for how much to pay and how much to charge. Do you have any
absolutely.
input on that?
I mean, when I first started filming weddings, I was paying about $300 per shooter. And I mean, this was when I was like still not even close to charging like what I am now. I was still, small potatoes back then. And, I was really paying for comfort when it comes to weddings. Like I was like, hey, I'm willing to pay like X amount of dollars just to have you ride with me for 3 hours. You know what I mean? Like, so I was probably not thinking about it in like a really smart logistical way or financial way, but no, I mean, over time it's kind of like been where, I also want to be respectful of someone's time because they are taking that time out of their day to help me. Even if they may not be, where I want them to be, like skill wise, I'm still gonna make sure that they're compensated for their time. I think I stuck with like $50 an hour for the longest time. And then I just kind of went to like a set rate at like 500. So once I got to like a certain point in my pricing for my business, and that's the key thing, is like you want to make sure that you're still budgeting properly because you don't want to lose money.
Right.
But you also want to have that assistance when needed. So yeah, I've found that like that's kind of like the sweet spot. And I always like to ask people what their rates are. Instead of just saying, hey, this is what my business does. Like we do $50 an hour plus this. I always like to be respectful of like, what's going to make it worth it for you. And I think that's kind of how I approached it with you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was one of those things where I was like, oh, awesome. Like he's not just like putting out a number and hoping that I would be there. It's like, he's considerate about me, like about, what we're doing, all of these little things. And I think that's a great way to approach somebody if you're wanting them to second shoot for you. It's just like, hey, I want to respect your time. What does it look like for you? What would it take for you to come and second shoot for me? Like, let's talk about it. And I think that's the thing. So communicating, especially with like pricing, it's one of those things that you have to do, and then you'll find out really quick like this is a good fit or maybe this isn't a good fit, and there's no hard feelings after that. And I think that's where we get stuck. I got stuck on like asking second shooters because I was like, oh well, I don't want them to think so and so about me, and it's like that's not the case. People are willing to help you, but you've got to be willing to help other people too, whether that's financially or whatever. So I love that. I love the idea of approaching somebody and asking them what would it take for them to come and take some of their time away from whatever they're doing to second shoot. But it's so worth it. It is so worth it. And I'll tell you, the last film that we did, having a second shooter, it just allowed me to just relax. And there's no better feeling than relaxing on a wedding day and shooting and knowing that everything else is covered. And even if it's not, at least I know that that person is doing their best to cover everything that I would typically cover without stressing or, being anxious about, oh my gosh, what are the shots going to look like? Disclaimer, they're not going to be the same shots that you shot. Yeah. Because people are different. People shoot different. So come with an expectation of they're willing to help me. They're willing to do the best that they can. They're not going to be exactly like I shoot. Unless they shoot repeatedly with you over and over again. Then you guys will start to kind of create a similar style of shooting and like color and all of this and get feedback and stuff. But don't expect a second shooter to just come in and nail it 100% your style, the way that you expose, your temperature, like white balance temperature, all of these things, they're not going to be perfect, but it is a process. It's something that, you just have to work with and kind of start molding in the right direction of your business, if that is the model that you want to take. We are very blessed that it's Yancy and I, so we both shoot together. And if at any point we do need a second shooter, if she's shooting photo, then I've got people that I've worked with before that I'm able to pull from and say, hey, I'd love for you to come and hang out with us. And that's really how we approach it. We're like, we would love to hang out with you. Do you want to get paid for that? And it opens up a conversation that is very genuine. It's very down to earth, and it makes people feel like, oh, they care about me. Like, they want me there, right? It's not like, hey, what would you charge for this? You're like, oh, here's another job. And guess what? You're going to get exactly that. Another job on the table.
100%. And they're so worth it. I mean, second shooters are so worth it. And for me, it's one of the things, like you said, I think you nailed it with this, is like, second shooters provide just peace of mind. And that, man, is just worth the price of admission right there. You know what I mean? It's like just having that peace of mind on a wedding day, knowing that, hey, I have some help. Case in point, I shot a wedding by myself this past Saturday in the mountains. It was a 3.5 hour drive, drove there by myself. It was an 8-hour day, filmed the wedding by myself, and then drove home same night. And so too, it's you don't really have that companion, that that person beside you, whispering thoughts of inspiration and giving you that encouragement and giving you that peace of mind on the day with additional angles, additional coverage, and helping you cover more ground. And not to say that I didn't serve my couple in the best way, but I think too, they could have been served a lot better if I did have a second shooter. I think visually, obviously, they could have been, served a lot better. But
right.
Sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches. If it's just you gotta just knock it out of the park. But definitely worth it, considering a second shooter for your business.
Yeah, for sure. So what would you say to somebody that's like, man, I don't know if I do need a second shooter or even want a second shooter? What are some things that they can look out for, either within their business, within their brand, to know, hey, maybe I can start looking for second shooters. Maybe I do want to incorporate second shooters, or the opposite. Maybe I really don't need second shooters. What are some things that they can look for?
I would say, if you feel like your films are just falling flat from a production standpoint, where, you're in the edit and you're like, man, it would actually be amazing if I had a close-up of this angle, or if I had a side shot profile, or if I was able to get a fourth camera during the ceremony, or a tracking shot of the bride, and groom, or, look at your films and think, how can these be better? How can I make this film better than it is in its current state? And I think you'll find that the answer to that is by hiring a second videographer, hiring someone else to help you, tell that story, capture those moments, and cover more ground, so that you're able to serve your couple in a better way, and you're able to up your production value as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what about to the person that doesn't need, what are some indicators of somebody not needing second? I can't seem to find any, but what would you say are some indicators to maybe a brand or something that doesn't necessarily need a second shooter? I mean, does that make sense? I think the only people that I can think of is maybe volume.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like even if you're a volume brand, I feel like a second shooter would probably still be warranted, just because I guess it does depend on your brand. It depends on the style of films that you are showing. It depends on, the type of films you like to make. I would say if you're an elopement-based videographer, you probably don't need two people, just because the days are a lot shorter. They're a lot more controlled.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
but for the church, it's a lot more intimate.
It's a lot more intimate,
so I
too.
feel like you have a little bit more one-on-one time with the couple opposed to a traditional wedding day.
Yeah, that's good.
Being where it's like chaos, right? You have this whole production timeline. You have to be, getting groom prep, bride prep in 2 separate locations. You have to also travel 30 minutes to the ceremony site or travel 15 minutes to the reception. So I think there's a lot of different factors that you need to consider when thinking about a second shooter or not getting a second shooter. You really have to just know your brand.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good. And this has been such an awesome conversation on just second shooters, and just kind of A, figuring out, do you need one? B, how do you find a good and solid second shooter, or what characteristics, what traits to look for? And 3, how do we become better at second shooting? And I think this was just awesome, and it allows me, it's got me thinking, how can I serve other brands better when I do second shoot for them, when I do go and serve them. At that point, it's not about my preferences. It's how can I elevate them as a whole, with everyone that I'm in contact with. So thanks for sharing all of that. And also, if you guys are not following Jared, go ahead and do so at his Instagram, which is Wayward North Films. You might have seen him on YouTube. If you're not following, go subscribe to his YouTube channel, Wayward North.
No films on that one.
That's it. Okay, no films, just Wayward North. And also, this has been super exciting for me. Jared has a podcast. He just started this podcast, which is awesome. Go check it out. The Films We Make, at The Films We Make on Instagram. Go show him some love. He is incredible. He's been doing this for a while, and I am super stoked to see the stuff that you put out on that podcast. It's going to help other filmmakers. It's I can't wait to listen to more of what you're putting out. But Jared, man, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, and just man, thanks again. We really appreciate it. If you guys want more resources, head over to theweddingstoryteller.co, and we will see you on the next one.